Hello my lovelies and welcome back to another video. I had the exciting privilege to be accepted onto the book tour for Delicious Monsters by Liselle Sambury, and if you haven't already had a chance to read this book, you are in for a delicious, delightful read of horror basically, and all things disturbing. So Delicious Monsters is, I believe, Sambury's third novel. This one is very different to her previous series where she was doing Blood Like Magic and Fates Like Magic, I think, of the book. I might have got that kind of wrong way around. They've been on my radar, but I have yet to read them, so this is my first read from this author. I followed them for quite a while, so it's really nice to be accepted onto this book tour. This is a YA horror, focusing a lot on forgotten black girl stories, haunted mansions and toxic relationships between mothers and daughters. Those are only just some of the themes, but there are some of the most prevalent themes, I would say personally, after reading the novel and kind of coming out the other side. Those are the ones that definitely stick to mind the most, but there's so much more bubbling underneath the surface. There's so much more complexity than just those. However, those are the main kind of buzzwords, I would say. So obviously go into this with you know, look in your trigger warnings if you think there's something that might set off some of your triggers. Definitely do your own research. We are following a dual narrative. We're following, we don't really get time periods, we don't really know. All we know is like it's 10 years before and 10 years later. So in the 10 years before, we're following Daisy, and Daisy has this direct link to this house. It's basically a haunted mansion, but you kind of see how all of this acclaim came about this house. It's also been dubbed as the Miracle Mansion, and people feel that they've been reformed from staying overnight in this house. But you learn early on that Daisy has some unique abilities that are quite disturbing in the way that she has to process them. And what else is quite disturbing is her relationship with her mother. Quite toxic, a very closed, unemotional, pretty low on love relationship, and she's basically the fixer. It's just them two. They always get into a situation where they need to move, and Daisy feels like it's always her job to make sure her mum can be committed into this new life that they're living. So when they get confirmation that they can move to this mansion, which has been in the works for years and years and years, although the history behind that is very mysterious. Daisy doesn't know a lot about why they've inherited it. She finds that along the way. Basically all her dreams have been relying on this, and she thinks, okay, finally this is the new start that we've been waiting for. Everything is just gonna be perfect. I can, you know, help my mum out, she can back me up financially, and I can finally like leave this attachment, this strange kind of relationship where there's not really much love. It just feels like I'm always fixing things. I want to stand on my own 2 feet. She's also just broken up in the very early pages with her older boyfriend Noah, and there's quite a bit of uncomfortable descriptions of that relationship, how they met, what goes on in the relationship, that she kind of comes to terms with, and you kind of see it in a different light as she's processing and grieving that relationship later on within the story. 10 years later, we're following Brittany. Now she has this documentary that she wants to make with her co-host Jaden, and they are focusing on this haunted mansion, but their pitch really is forgotten black girls. They want to know the stories of the girls that were involved in this mansion. They didn't get enough publicity or enough representation because of their race. She's also strangely directly involved with the mansion because she has a mother who has dubbed it the Miracle Mansion, and she has become a successful memoir writer, talking about how she was a shitty mum, she went there and everything changed. However, Brittany knows that within herself, everything that her mum is kind of saying to the press and writing about in her books is not all that it seems. She's still the same mother, she just hides it better. So those are the 2 main characters that we're really focusing on, but there's just so many other characters in here that add so much depth to the story. They all, even like the supporting cast, just all they just all influence everything so perfectly, and I can't imagine any one character that didn't bring something beneficial to the story. The horror itself was fantastic. I think personally it's the most extreme sort of horror I've read so far. I'm still quite a baby newbie in the world of horror. Obviously I've read like Junji Ito, and that's quite extreme, but in terms of like written prose rather than manga, this is one of the most extreme that I've read so far. The body gore was amazing. It actually made me feel itchy. Like there were some descriptions of like maggots being pulled out of places, and it made me feel so sick, but it was done so well. The house itself also felt like such an oppressive entity that it felt like its own character, and it was always at the background of some conversation. It was always kind of just there looming, that you had this sense continuously that something was going to happen, something bad was going to happen. Even if you were in like a seemingly happy, positive scene, there was just this oppressive air about it. And yes, that character arc for the house itself was superbly done. Daisy's main hobby and her only solace really is gardening, and with that we see her at her best self, I guess, when she is taking care of plants, watching them grow, look after them. She does not like flowers, just green leafy plants. And with that as well, I quite enjoyed the fact that we got a lot of plant metaphors for other areas of the story, extended to things such as their names. There's a character called Ivy, obviously we've got Daisy, and then a term that was quite often used called the gardener of the house, which was so fantastically utilised in that specific scene that I'm thinking of in the top of my head. Like it just worked so well. At times the gardening hobby did get a little bit overbearing, but I guess if that's the only happiness that you really have in your life, of course you're gonna always be mentioning it in your inner monologue and doing it a lot, you know. It makes sense when I think about it. I did struggle a little bit with the time. I think personally I would have preferred having like the actual years, because I couldn't really place the timeline. Just hearing 10 years later, 10 years before, I wanted to know specific times roughly at least, and that was it. Just those sort of things help me ground in a story, so I just felt a little bit lost in that sense. As well as that, I felt like when you're within a chapter, there were some times when I felt like time just felt like nothing. Like I didn't know how much time had passed from one event to the next, which kind of makes sense because one character does end up going through a loss of time. She loses time, but as a reader perspective, I think I would have definitely have preferred, just for my benefit really, to know a little bit more detail, a little bit more of a heads up of really that specific how long had passed, even though I can understand from the character's perspective she was losing time, and there was genuine reason for why that was the case. Oh, there was just so many genuine moments where my throat felt so tight, like when the details were slowly eased out and then dropped all of a sudden, just when you thought you was going to get that bit of information and then it was taken from you. Every time my throat tightened, it was from like raw emotion or just pure terror or revulsion or just dread, looming dread, and oh my god, sorrow and sympathy for the characters. It was just so perfectly atmospheric, and it just delivered the tension and all the emotions that you could want from this kind of story, where we've not only got actual haunting horror, but we've got the horror of the mind, we've got bodily horror, we've got different levels of abuse, and all these different things just mounting up and up and up, and it's just you feel like you're constantly on edge and you're waiting for the next thing to happen, but you're still holding your breath, hoping that these characters are okay at the end of the day. Overall, I've got to say I loved absolutely every minute of this book. It was fantastic, haunting, utterly terrifying, and just beautiful as a novel. Thank you so much to Hear Our Voices and the publishers for allowing me to join on this book tour. Definitely check it out when you can. It releases on the 28th of February 2023. When you do get a chance of reading it, do let me know what you think. Come back to this video, share your thoughts, I'd love to know. If you want to know some more details on my thoughts and feelings of this novel, definitely check out my Goodreads and my Instagram, where I've put up the rest of my thoughts and feelings. But for now, that is it for this video. Thank you ever so much for watching, and I shall speak to you in another video soon. Bye!